Well, hey guys, and welcome to Ministry Hangouts with Pastor Greg Surratt. Today, Pastor Greg is actually teaching at the Ark Exchange in Ireland, and so he's unable to be with us, but he may be watching from Ireland right now. I think it's about 10 or 11 at night there, and probably just finishing up a round of golf and enjoying the Ireland and learning to speak to the Irish people there and about church planting. But so my name is Sean Wood. I'm usually just the sidekick and co-host here on Ministry Hangouts with Pastor Greg, but today I get the honor of just kind of throwing out some questions that I'm going to learn from to two guys who, through the Ark, have planted churches, who are doing some incredible things in their respective cities, and who we're all going to learn from their mistakes and what they've learned from their mistakes and how we can in turn learn from those as well. So let me just introduce you to our panel before we jump right in to today's topic. First, Pastor Josh Mauney from Lexington. Just tell us a little bit about your church and when you planted and all that kind of stuff, Josh.
Yeah, man, thank you so much, and to Pastor Greg for letting me be on here, and I will say, Pastor Randy, you'll never know this, you'll never remember this ever, but it was like years and years and years, way before we went to plant. I ended up sitting next to you in an airport in North Carolina, and we talked for like 20 minutes. You walked off. The guy that was traveling with me knew who you were. And he was like, "You don't know who that is? That's Randy Bezet. Are you crazy? Man, you just sat and talked down." And I like looked you up later, totally stalked you, totally checked out, and I was just blown away that you would sit and talk to a guy like me. I mean, it was just your humility and just your kindness, and as I've just followed you over the years as we planted our church, you've just always been that guy. So to see your name next to mine on a hangout like this is just, it kind of frazzles my brain a little bit, but I've always admired you from afar, so it's really cool to get to do this with you.
Thank you, Josh. That's really cool. I don't remember that specific moment, but I think that is the beauty, to talk about the Ark. That is the beauty of the Ark, is that there's no pretension in anybody in the Ark. It's the relational network of all relational networks, and it just doesn't get any purer and more life-giving than that. And if I can add value to that, and it's added a ton of value to me, so I'm glad that I got to do that. Thanks for that word. I really appreciate that. And so I'm in Florida, by the way. I pastor Bezet Community Church. We started 12 years ago. In fact, just about 4 weeks ago, we celebrated our 12th birthday. So that's been exciting times. We actually my wife and I went up for 6 months to Seacoast and did like a little internship for about 6 months to hang out there and learn how to do church. And it was, I'm going to tell you what, if you're considering planting a church and you've never been in a church that's like what you want to start, I would recommend go do that. Now, would I have been successful anyway? That's very debatable, that's for sure. But I will tell you that going there gave me, I believe, years of advantage. So I think the learning curve, or the church growth curve, should I say, was probably a whole lot steeper because I spent 6 months just kind of sitting under the tutelage of Seacoast Church, and so that was huge. So anyway, I'm thankful for my 12 years. It's been awesome.
That's awesome. Pastor Randy came to Seacoast for 6 months, and then they sent him out to plant. My name is Sean Wood. I think I already introduced myself, but I was there 13 years, and then they sent me out to plant. So it took a lot longer for them to infuse me, Pastor Randy, with a 13-year internship before they were ready.
You're a slow learner, man. Golly.
Slow learner. I still have to go back and learn all the time. So
actually, what it is you were just so good they didn't want to get rid of you. I didn't take them but a few months to realize we got to get this dude out of here.
I don't think that's true, but hey, but what we're going to learn about is learning today, because it's easy to see all the statistics and fastest growing churches and sit beside someone in the airport and think, oh my goodness, I know this guy has been blessed by God and favored by God. It's incredible what God's doing. But we all know that what a lot of people don't get to kind of experience really is, what I often call the sausage making factory. All of us like sausage, but nobody wants to go see it made. And there's some stuff that's been made in the 3 years, Josh, that you at Turning Point have just had an amazing success there, and God's done some incredible things. I know there's been stuff there that you can share that people can learn from. And Randy, with 12 years, it's not been all roses and butterflies, and we know that as church planners, that it's tough, it's hard, and we make mistakes and we learn from them, and that's the key. I think if you find yourself in the position that either of you guys are in, and what we see throughout the Ark is just a group of men and women who learn from each other, share with each other the real deal about stuff, and we know what church planning is before we go into it, but we learn from each other's mistakes. And so that's what we would talk about. We kind of weighted the panel just a little bit today. We've got Josh, who's 3 years into it, hadn't had time to make a lot of mistakes, but they're real fresh, right? And so he can share from some freshness. And then Pastor Randy, 12 years, you've had time to make a few and probably learn from a few, and can share with people. So we're excited about that. And then being at Seacoast for 13 years and working closely with Pastor Greg, with 26 years behind the Seacoast mantle, there's some funny mistakes and some ways that they've learned to even process those mistakes that maybe I'll be able to jump in and help with. But Randy, as you think back over the course of your journey and really the past 12 years, and what would you say is kind of the biggest mistake you've made, but really as you look at it, in the end, it was a huge learning and maybe even a leap forward for you guys as you learned from it?
Well, it's funny that we're only going to spend a maximum of an hour on talking about mistakes, because we could surely go a lot longer. And so mistakes are inevitable. And so the good news is, if you're making mistakes, here's the good news, that you're trying, and you can't have success without trying. Henceforth, you can't have failure either. So I don't mind failing. I hate repeating mistakes. Yeah. So to me, that's the thing that gets under my skin more than anything else, is doing something stupid twice. And I'm originally from Louisiana. Us Cajuns, we're great at doing stupid stuff. So I just don't want to do it twice. But I guess the thing that probably would resonate with most pastors is the lesson that I learned with what I would say are really first major crisis. And you've heard people say leadership is lonely. It's kind of lonely at the top. And the Ark is obviously counterculture to that, and we have people we can call and ask questions to and all of that. But there's something about being in the seat of a lead pastor that just feels lonely. May not be the right word for it, because it's not like you don't have people around you, but the pressure is on. The pressure is always on you. You have to know the answer. You have to know where to go next. And you might have people that you can call and ask questions to, but you still have to own that decision. And oftentimes it can feel lonely, or you can feel alone when you're making the decision. And maybe that's the huge danger that pastors can put themselves in a lot of time, because it may feel that way, but we shouldn't necessarily lead that way. And actually what it does is it puts us in a very insecure place. Here's what I mean by that. You're forced with a place. You might be at a crossroads, and you're like, well, which direction do I go? And you don't want to seem like you don't know what to do. So you almost, that fake it till you make it kind of a thing. And that's a real danger, because chances are you'll make a lot more bad decisions that way. Okay, so here's when I learned that lesson. We were building our facility, our first permanent facility. We were 7.5 years doing portable church. Setup team, they loved us. Okay, so we were building a building in 2008, and that's when the financial collapse happened. And I was really discouraged. The bank called us and said, sorry, we don't have your money. And we had already started the project, kind of had a groundbreaking, kind of rah, look at this, what God is doing. And then we lost our financing. And I was so discouraged. In fact, I was with Greg and my brother Rick, the ARC board, the leadership team, and I was so discouraged. I was actually begging those guys to offer me a job, because I was ready to quit. And none of them did. And I came back we were actually meeting in Orlando, and I was driving back to the church that day after our meetings, and I just felt so lonely, I guess. I didn't know what to do. I felt so alone, kind of in no man's land. And I realized that I needed to have people helping me share the burden of this alone. And not that I just have people outside the church to help me with this, but I needed the rally the pastors and our leadership team in the house of Bayside Community Church and share it with them. And I did. I called them to the church. I sat down with them, and I literally bawled my eyes out and poured my heart out to them. And you know what happened? Listen to this, Josh and Sean. They weren't like, oh, well, Pastor, we're looking to you for answers. All of a sudden, they rallied around me and began to encourage me, reminding me of all the things that God had done. Therefore, he will finish what he started, and we'll figure it out together. And they prayed with me. They hugged me. They just encouraged me. And it was that moment gave me not a lot of faith, but it gave me enough faith to continue the journey. And I learned a valuable lesson that you're not supposed to lead the church alone.
That's good. And then, that's sort of what ARC, you alluded to this earlier, Pastor Randy, but ARC is a little counterculture to this, and we're saying don't do it alone. Don't go out there and try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try and be the Lone Ranger. But you know how it is. All of us do. You get into the mix of it, and you believe that, and you want it to be true. But oftentimes we can go, but nobody wants to share this burden with me. Everybody's gonna look at me and go, "How'd you lose the financing, dummy? Like, what'd you do?" And you're going, "I didn't. It's 2008, And so I think that's a great lesson, because what you found was something on the other side of that. How about you, Josh? What's a big mistake that you guys see, but you go, you know what? That really pushed us forward into new territories. And then Pastor Randy, I want to come back to you too and go, how has that helped you? And just give you time to think about this, but how has that helped you now, knowing that for future crises that have come up? But Josh, how about you, learning that big thing for you?
Yeah, so we launched through ARC on February 12th of 2012, and this thing just kind of took off like a rocket ship, and we just worked the plays. I didn't know that much. I just decided to just do everything they told me to do exactly like they told me to do it, and
smart man right there.
Yeah, and but what I didn't, and now through ARC, I've had the amazing privilege of now I kind of do a lot of coaching of church planners, and now I kind of coach all of the coaches of church planners, and so and I've gotten to teach a lot of the ARC 2.0s for the last 2 years, and I say all that to say what I'm about to say is when I look back at my schedule in those early days, like I'm almost embarrassed to tell you like what I was doing on a weekly basis, and to know how many planters I've coached over the last 2 years, like to know, like I'm almost embarrassed to say, like I would never really want somebody to see the schedule that I was doing on a weekly basis. We had already, at this point, we had already baptized 300 people in this new church plant, and I was still, I was still doing pro presenter slides, and was helping.
I still do mine.
Yeah, helping with the giving, and like I was coming and cleaning up the floors, and like I was just doing everything. And at first, I thought it was like this. It was like this. Kind of like, I don't know, goofy, like if you want something done right, that kind of attitude, which is actually, it's a super prideful, it's masked in like selfless service, but it's super prideful and super unhealthy.
Yeah, that's right.
And so in the early days, I was just doing just too much stuff. And here was the fear, because I would experience this, like in the first maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks, I was like, okay, I can't keep programming all of the lights myself. Like, I should let someone else program the lights. There's a lot of people coming to church. Somebody should program lights. So I gave it away, and of course, you know where I'm going with this. I step up to preach, and it just goes black as midnight. Like, just like, and I'm like, I'm at that point where I'm like, I'm getting numbness on the left side. I know I'm having a stroke. Like, it's
yeah, absolutely.
Like everything's shutting down, and then about the time I'm just like I don't know what we're gonna do, the lights come on, and we go on with the morning and whatever. Yeah. And I had this decision to make when I went home that day, and it was to rip the lighting back and take it back onto my schedule that was already too crazy. Or in that moment, I just decided I'm going to equip them through the dip. Because I didn't understand this when we first started, that every time I gave something away when we started, the quality, at least for a minute, was going to dip. Because they didn't know exactly how I wanted it, or how to do it, or they didn't have the skills, or we're dealing with volunteers. And so a lot of times in leadership, and especially in my very kind of immature, almost kind of prideful beginning, I would say, well, I would experience the dip, the quality would start to go down, and I would rip it back and say, I'll just do it then. I'll just do it. I'll do the slides, or I'll do the – and what God really broke off of me in that first year was the need to do that, and then really the understanding of my role as a pastor to equip people through the dips. So when the lighting went bad, that first time, instead of ripping it back, I went back and we spent a few hours, taught him how to do it. And now that same guy, he could get those lights to make you a sandwich.
I'll take a Cuban sandwich.
Yeah, but it would have never happened if I'm still running lights, 2.5 years in. And that's one example I'm kind of embarrassed to say of a lot of things that I had to kind of grow up and say, man, if this thing's going to be great, I have to let it be bad in some areas every now and then until it gets better.
But Josh, where's the balance? I'm curious to know. You just recently planted 3 years ago, so this is a lot fresher, more fresh on your mind than it is on mine. But there's the balance between you having a good handle on everything, so that you know what it's supposed to look like and feel like and all that, and the balance between that and also giving it away. So for church planters and just pastors whose churches are, still growing and at the beginning stages, how do you find that balance between you got to do it first so you know it and then giving it away?
Yeah, I think we got to know the standard. And for us, when we were first starting, I think in a lot of ways I was figuring out what that was. So you got to know the standard, then you got to communicate the standard, and then you have to enforce the standard. Mm-hmm. And when the leaders that we ended up pulling along, honestly, they weren't the smartest, they weren't the most tech savvy, they weren't all that. They were people that would listen to me tell them the standard. So now they knew the standard. They would communicate the standard, and then if they ever saw that dipping below what our conversation was, they would enforce the standard.
That's good. And something I learned at Seacoast too, it goes along with that. Pastor Greg is a genius at systems. He understands systems, and he says that he's so disorganized that he has to be a genius at systems. And Pastor Randy knows Pastor Greg and knows he flows from the what he feels, and so he says I've got to have systems in place. And what I saw in him was someone who was very aware of everything going on, and yet did not have his hands in everything going on. It was, and I saw the way he did that was through systems. People who would both report for him what the standard was, but report back to him what was actually going on. And it was just flow that would happen, so that when he needed to, he could step in and kind of take care of whatever he needed to, or put a special project for somebody to be on.
Let me piggyback on this. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, and I think the key there is what Sean said, is that Pastor Greg always had the ability to step in. That I think we, as church planners, when we first start, we have authority over everything, but it's really just us because we don't have a church yet. We have authority, but we don't necessarily have competency in everything. But we're the ones trying to set the standard everywhere. And then as you grow, you can make great hires and bring people on. You bring people on that have great competency, but you still get to maintain the authority.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we first started growing, really, and we started handing stuff away, the tension that you always wrestle with in a church plant, because you're young on the vision, you're young on, on so many things. You'll put people into a leadership position, and they're always trying to fight you for authority. And even when and sometimes they don't even have the competency. It's just, so it's always a it's always a wrestling match kind of, and maybe it always is, Pastor Randy, you probably could speak to that. Maybe it's always a wrestling match, and that authority and the competency and trying to navigate that.
Well, okay, so Seacoast has been going 26 years, so Sean could probably speak to this even more in depth, but even in a 12-year stint, I can tell you that there is always tension in that. But so to dissect all of this a little bit, first of all, I think everybody ought to tweet what you just said. You got to equip through the dip. So I don't know what your hashtag is, but whatever it is, that's a great principle, and it's definitely really cool. So I'll give it to you the first time.
Hashtag ministry hangouts is what the hashtag is.
That's okay. So I don't even have to give him credit. Then I can just at Randy Bezet said at ministry hangouts while
that's
he's
right.
doing there.
Okay, I probably stole it from one of your sermons anyway.
Yeah, right. Sure. You will be in a couple weeks because I'm going to be using that. All right. So the deal is, all right, then, so if I were watching this, I would ask the question, then how do you equip through the dip? Because these are great principles, but without a paint by numbers thing, most pastors don't know how to translate this into what do I do next? And here's what I found. I'm a lot like Greg in the sense that I want to know everything that's going on, but I really don't want to be responsible for it, like personally involved in it. Because, you know, I hate empowering people that have to do their job. I'll fire you or whatever because it's irrelevant. I probably would never give you the position. We haven't made a lot of stupid hires because I don't hire people and then expect them to do it. I hire those who are already doing it. Okay, it costs me more money not to hire them than it would be to hire them because they're doing such a great job. So when we go to this equip through the dip, how do you do that? So the systems that we have created is, first of all, and most churches don't have this, which actually kind of boggles my mind. Well, we didn't have it when we were early on either. But I've created all these things so we can give the pastors and help them. First of all, you got to have a job description, and you got to have the standard, which, Josh, you talked about the standard. In other words, here's what I'm expecting you to do. Now, the problem with most pastors is we define the job description as I want you to be the light person, okay, and I want the lights to be bright when they're supposed to be and dark when they're supposed to be, you know, okay, all right, okay, oh, okay, right, but what exactly does that mean? What is the standard? And we think because we verbalized it, they get it, but communication isn't just sharing, it's that they have to understand the information and be able to apply it to situations. So the only way to do that is to have clearly defined job descriptions and standards. So you must have that for every volunteer and every leader in your organization. So when you give the light guy, you go, here's what I'm asking you to do. It's clearly defined because there is going to be a dip. And you want to make sure they're equipped to knowing what the standard is so that it can meet that. And then if they can't meet that standard, then you have to have a way to say, well, then maybe this isn't for you. Or what I found most of the time is that you start giving people the standard and they start living to that and are doing a good job. But the people that you're building on today become the scaffolding for tomorrow. They can take it to a certain level, but your church is going to continue to grow. And sometimes the people that you're building on today become the scaffolding. In other words, all you do is use them to build other people for later on. And they never move past that position. Right. And so you got to constantly be equipping through the dip and equipping more people and raising the standard and clearly communicating that.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things that changed for me, and I love just the clear standards and a clear job description, because it goes back to the heart as their leader, that if they don't get it, it's on us. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's easy to really like pound our fist on the table and dadgummit, I want those lights on but I've gotten a lot more peace. I sleep better at night, and I think I get better buy-in when I change my perspective to go, man, what didn't I tell them?
Yep.
And it just
that's the first question to ask when you're in a dip and the dip doesn't go up, right? So that you don't necessarily find the standard being raised. The first thing you have to do as a leader is you got to look in the mirror, which is the most uncomfortable part, and that's what you're talking about. And it is, what did I not do? So I go to them and I go, okay, here's the standard, but there must be something about that you don't understand. And you can also ask the question, what am I not doing to resource you to do that. And resources, not always in dollars. It could be in clarity of some things, but they may not have the right equipment that they need to do the lights like you would like them. Mm-hmm. So if you're not resourcing them, but you expect the standard to be here, it's not their fault and it's not your fault. I guess it is your fault in that you didn't resource them. Mm-hmm. But there's a lack of resources there. So make sure you give them those things so they can perform to the standard.
That is great stuff right there. If you're a church planner listening, let me put this in the context just a little bit. We had a secret shopper that we brought in about 2 weeks ago to come into Freedom Church and just kind of go through. We're 3 years old. We felt like it was time to kind of see with other eyes. And we met with them this past week, and we came up with a list of just stuff that, that we're going, oh my goodness, how did we miss this? We didn't see that. We didn't know what was going on. And every single one of them was involving a leader or a volunteer in some area that wasn't meeting expectation. Every single one of them. Then at staff meeting, we started to kind of dig into it a little bit. And I can echo, Pastor Randy, what you're saying. It hit me hard when you just said it just now, because every single one of them, of the issues that we face, can be solved by us asking the question, what have we not taught them or told them? Because it wasn't their fault. Like, we either didn't teach them something, or we haven't told them the expectation in that area. They weren't willingly just going, hey, let's mess this up. Let's not be good at customer service. Let's not do. They just didn't know, and that comes back on us. And we had gotten so into the grind. So our mistakes were actually birthed out of us not resourcing them to get through the dip. And I know for me, I'm a choleric. I'm a pound the, let's go take the hill. And I know for me, oftentimes I can kind of point my finger going, why aren't they doing it? And it oftentimes is an equipping problem. I mean, it really is.
You want a recipe for a really unhealthy culture in a church is to not manage that tension that you were feeling. Going, well, and not addressing it, because what happens is you're frustrated because they're not hitting the mark. They know they're not hitting the mark, but they don't want to dishonor you, and then ultimately when you don't solve that stuff gets nasty, and then people leave the church, and there starts to get backbiting and all kind of, all of that stuff going on, and then you wonder, well, what's wrong with people? As the leader, like you said, you've got to look at it and make decisions. So part of that is feel free about talking about the areas that you're not hitting the mark in, and breeding a culture of discussing those kind of things.
Yeah, I love thinking about, growing teams and reinforcing standards like you're riding a bicycle. Like, you've got an excellence pedal and you've got a growth pedal, just in terms of team growth and all that. And I don't think that you can be pedaling both pedals at the same time. If you pedal both pedals at the same time, the bike doesn't go anywhere. You're just fighting each other. So there are seasons where there are natural growth seasons in the church, so we just add people. We're adding. But then there are times where we know we hit natural lulls just as the year, and I think we've tried to systematize just really driving down on all these new people came in the growth season. Our assimilation process was great. All these new people came in. They're in. Now we got to start pushing down on the excellence pedal. So what are we doing right now for everybody that's on our teams? Are we talking about standards? Are we talking about, and just for our leaders, they need to hear this stuff over and over and over, and I tell my teams, this may not be the greatest description, but I sit with my leadership team and I say, when you're sharing the vision of this church and you start to go starting to make you sick because you said it so many times, you're almost there. Mm-hmm. Like you almost started to say it enough. And so I would tell any church planner, any leader, think about it like pedals on a bike. So there are times where, man, let's just add as many people to the mix as we can add, because you're going to have those natural growth seasons. You can't manufacture that momentum. You can just ride it. But then when you get into those lull seasons, man, drive down on the standards and drive down on who you are. Go back to those core values and all that stuff, so that when you hit the growth season again, you're growing into who you set out to become.
That's good. Now, Pastor Randy, I want to go back to your first learning just for a minute and say, okay, you went through this 2008 crashes. You're carrying the load all by yourself. Now, fast forward almost 6 years now, and you've gone through some crises, I'm sure, in those 6 years, crises in those 6 years. How has that learning changed how you've handled some of those things now?
It's changed a whole lot, Sean, and it's really kind of goes parallel to what we've already been discussing, standards and excellence. I would talk about it in this term, which is empowering more leaders. So what we realized, or what I realized, that's now translated into an amazing leadership pipeline, a system to develop leaders. We call them coaches. They function as biblical elders in our church, but we call them coaches. And that is, I had to realize, like Moses did, that the burden was too heavy for me to carry. So if I didn't create a system to take leaders and pick the best leaders and then empower them, that ultimately the same spirit that is on me for excellence and doing the job, all of the things that we've been talking about here, to take that same spirit that's on me as the point leader and to put that spirit on other people. That's exactly what Moses did. So we developed what we call a coaching system to empower all of those leaders. And so what happens is when somebody's a leader in our church, pick any ministry area, hospitality, small groups, outreach, whatever it is, from there people are handpicked by pastors, and then they go through a process, kind of a vetting process, to determine if they would be good coaches or elders, okay? Then they go through 6 weeks of leadership training. We call it Coaches in Training, CIT. They go through 6 weeks of that, and after they finish that, we take them away on a weekend, and we do a coaches commissioning weekend, and we lay hands on them and pray for them, and we empower them. We actually install them as elders or coaches in our church. And the same desire and passion for our church to have excellence and all of that now falls on them. And so now I have all of these people carrying the burden of this here with me. And we have 250 elders now in our church, or coaches, and they sign up for a 2-year commitment. And when they sign up, speaking of job descriptions and expectations, their job description and expectations are they're volunteering 12 to 15 hours a week in their area of ministry for our church. And we pick them from people who are already doing the ministry. In other words, we don't pick them and then they do it. They're already leaders in our church. And it created a middle management leadership level in our church, which really is helping carry the vision. So all of that was birthed really from this thing in 2008.
That is awesome. Now, is there a way, if a pastor or church leader wanted to find out more about that and how you guys do that, is there a way, is that through the Relate Coaching? Can they find out about that, or is there another way, Pastor Randy, to do that?
Yeah, that's the best way to find it. You can go to relatecoaching.com, relatecoaching.com, and all of that information is on there. And you can get that information there, but ultimately we try to provide personal relationship coaching like we're doing right here on this Google Hangout as well. Through Relate Coaching. But yes, all of that is available there.
That's awesome. That is great. Hey, next question. Chip Judd, who's one of the pastors at Seacoast, friend of Pastor Greg's and mine, says to count mistakes as a fairly cheap master's degree. And it sounds great when he's saying it, but I can tell from experience when you're in the middle of that learning, you go, oh, I'd have rather gone to school, you know. I mean, I'd
rather punch him in the mouth for saying that, really.
but sometimes it's hard. It's very hard. Have you ever felt, and Pastor Randy, you even talked about this a little bit already, but have you guys ever really gotten to that point where you're like, I'm done. Like, I want to do something different. I'm discouraged. And because I think there's probably folks out there, leaders and pastors, or maybe church planners, right in the midst of that first year or something, that are there right now. And I think it'd be encouraging to hear of your discouragement, I guess. But have y'all ever been there? And how did you get through that season, Pastor Randy?
Well, I learned that lesson when at the story that I told you guys a little bit earlier, and I was ready to quit. It's been several other instances where that kind of stuff has happened, where we were about 3 years into it, and we had a leader who was like one of my best friends. They left, and like a church split thing, and they went and started another church, took up 100+ people with them. Did I want to quit? Heck yeah, I definitely wanted to quit. And probably just about every Monday I want to quit because I hadn't figured out how to preach like Josh yet, so I'm working on it. But it's through those moments where I've wanted to quit. So I'll go back to the point I made earlier. First of all, you got to have relationships, kind of counterpart people like other pastors, and that's the beauty of the Ark. Because of the relationships you have, you know who to call, you know where to get answers for those kind of things. But you really need to have a few people in your church. You can't listen to everybody. But I have a few people around me that I've given the right to speak into my life and for me to round table things with them. And it's kept me on the path when I felt like I wanted to quit. And, you know, and here's the danger. Here's what every pastor says. You see people on Twitter, and nobody ever tweets the terrible stuff, right? They only put the good stuff. So, or you see them at a conference, and you go, dang, man, I wish we were there. If we had, you know, 1,000 people, if we had 5,000, if we had our own building, whatever it is, you fill in the blank, you think the problems would be solved. But those guys have problems just like you do. We just switch one problem for another, and so you're constantly discouraged about something. And you got to have relationships around you. It really boils down to that. That's the secret, Sean. You got to have relationships. I mean, authentic, real people around you, and that's what I've learned.
That's great. Kim Meyer once said this statement, and I use it all the time. And you said it great. He said, everybody can't be in that spot. If you got everybody in that spot, then you're more discouraged. But you got to have somebody who can tell you you don't look good in biker shorts. Like, there's got to be somebody.
Hey, don't mess with my biking shorts, bro. Those fighting words.
You got a big LSU logo on the back of it, right?
Stop it, Sean. I'm going to mute you, buddy.
But you got to have somebody who can do that. And I know we were going through a pretty difficult time in our first year of just a staff change that had to happen. It wasn't a moral thing. It wasn't a character thing. It was just purely just something that was the best move for the church, and it was just discouraging. It was depressing. Then our trailer got stolen with everything that we owned as a church in it 1 week before our 1 year anniversary, and literally 6 days before our 1 year anniversary. And we're going, how are we even going to have church? And I mean, you talk about ready to go back to Seacoast and go, okay, what can I do? And I remember I had that guy in my life who can tell me, you know, who's got that ability, and he spoke words into my life, and he said a phrase that may not have worked for anybody else, but he said, "This is a gift. You got to see this stuff as a gift." And I wanted to punch him, you know, when he said that, but then he started going, "Here's why it's a gift. You're going to see the church rally around you," and we did. The big C church, man, Seacoast and New Spring and Elevation and other churches gave, and art churches gave, and by the end of that week, we had $40,000 that came in to buy everything we needed to do church that week. And it was incredible to see the church just kind of rise up and help us with that. And then the letters and the notes and the stuff that came in, and then we got on the news because our trailer got stolen, and so we got free commercials all over the place for our 1 year anniversary. You know, we couldn't have afforded to have it. He said, "These are gifts. These are all gifts." And it was through pain. I mean, it really, I can laugh about it now, but man, it was a hard season. And now what we saw is what we really needed to see was the encouragement that was there for that. So it's just an incredible season that can happen. How about you, Josh? You're 3 years in. I mean, have you had those moments? And what would you say to a pastor who's watching right now who's going, I'm ready to quit. I haven't grown to 1,000 in 3 years. I haven't, you know, done the things that you guys are talking about, and I am discouraged right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of echo, you know, Pastor Randy, in that, you know, about every Sunday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, I'm done forever. And then somewhere around Monday afternoon, I get about 18 in, and I realize again, no, that ministry has value, and I'm probably not horrible, and I should go back to work on Tuesday. And so I get that. One of the things that I'll say is, man, if you're a church planter or you're thinking about planting,
don't do it. No.
Well, we're looking to hire. No, I'm just kidding. It's just, you've got to get a tribe. Like, you have got to get a group of people to do this with. And I just can't stress it enough. I mean, there's no way. There's no way we have the success we have. There's no way that I manage when they tell you, hey, your launch team's going to leave you, bud. Your launch team, and I'm like, well, you're not as good of a pastor as I am. Yeah. So that's why they left you. I'm super nice. And then, like, a month 11, when we had that just mass exodus, and that's just I'm having a nervous breakdown. I had guys, they were ARC guys, and I picked up the phone and said, I'm quitting, and they said, no, you're not. Quit being a big baby. Go take a 2-day vacation and then get back to work. You got a church to run. and it was just, but it's just been priceless, because I think it's kind of like you guys said. I got, it's easy to talk about the wins, but if you don't have somebody, man, where you can just call and say, man, my heart's broken, and talk you through it, man, just a brother. So that's been the biggest thing for me, and it wasn't easy for me initially. Again, I kind of talked about in our first year, apparently I was just trying to lone wolf it. I was just going to do it all, and that's no way to do it. And if I could save anybody any of that headache, man, is just get some friends in this game. And if you're looking for a group of guys, man, you'd be hard pressed to find guys that could do better for you.
I agree with you.
That's awesome. I heard Pastor Chris, I'll just say recently, the way you have success in life is you make good choices. The way you make good choices is experience. And the way you get experience is by making bad choices. So I thought that was great in this context, but the key there is figuring out what was bad choices and what was good choices, and that's like assessment. So let's talk just for a moment. How do you guys assess things as far as to learn, okay, we got to this point, this happened in the weekend, this is the way our groups are working out, we're losing people out the back door, our kids ministry, whatever it is, but how do we assess these decisions and go, okay, that's not worth doing again because we looked at that before and that was a bad choice. Now we've got experience, so we're not going to make them. And I'll quickly say one of the things I learned from Pastor Greg at Seacoast is he's got this grid that he takes everything through, and it's just kind of this thing where he says, okay, is it a big payoff with a low cost, or is it a low payoff with a big cost, or a low payoff with a low cost, or a big payoff with a low cost, which is what we're always looking for. And not cost isn't always just money, like Pastor Randy said earlier. Is it going to cost us, time? Is it going to cost us integrity? Whatever it may be. And he just always would take every decision we were making through this grid and go, okay, let's try to get as many to fall into this very, very big payoff, but very low cost, and then that way we don't lose it over this thing. And that was very helpful, just a system we had in place. How about for you guys, systems you have in place of evaluating, assessing, or making decisions to make sure you don't make more bad decisions? Like you said, Pastor Rennie, don't make the same dumb decision twice. You got anything there, Pastor Randy?
Yes. So for us, I think you actually answered, some of the question, and that is extremely important, is to have an assessment. If you're not assessing things, if you don't look at data, you're never going to know whether you're doing a good job or not. If you only go by what a few people tell you, so you're going to get, emails and comments that, that your sermon was awful, or your church services are awful and people don't want to come back. Okay, that's not, if you just listen to those few people, that's not necessarily good. If you just listen to the people who come up to you after an event and go, that's the greatest thing ever, okay, that's not necessarily good assessment. If we're only doing it for the attaboys, or we're only trying to solve the critical people and try to use that for an assessment, that's really bad assessment. That's actually, stupid. Okay, so what I recommend you do is use numbers. How many people are showing up to those events? How much are people giving? Are these things working or not? Numbers do not lie. They don't tell all the story, but they tell a large part of the story. So you have to assess what you're doing and be willing to make adjustments. So around here, we tell people this. We tell people you have to take ownership of what you're doing. Ownership goes back to the thing you were discussing earlier, Josh, and that is excellence. Okay, so when you have ownership of something, do it with excellence, but you cannot be possessive. Yeah. All right, and that's good for several things, because God may bring somebody else in that's better than you, and they'll take it to the next level. But you can't be possessive in the sense that you're not willing to round table and listen to other people. How did that event go off? Were people there? Did it go like we wanted it to? And assess that, and then shoot stuff in the head that's not working, and fix things that are working that need adjustments. So we try to do things with excellence around here, and excellence isn't perfection, but it's just constantly trying to assess things and do them better and better. So that's kind of how we use it. We look at hard data and we evaluate them and make changes for everything.
That's good. Now, Pastor Randy, do you do any kind of assessment of the weekend when you guys are done? Do you have a team that you get together and say what went well, what didn't go well, and have a system for that as well as looking at those numbers?
Yeah, actually, we even do that as well, like after the first service. So we currently have 5 services that are what you would call our main campus. And after the very first service on Saturday night, the key people, the programming manager, the worship leader, the speaker, and the campus pastor there, we get together and we assess everything and how the service went. And you can't have you got to have not thick skin, but you got to have a real sensitive heart. In other words, you got to be willing to. Everything's on the table. They tell me that was a real stupid point, Randy. Don't do that again. All right, and they always have one of those at least. But we assess everything and we make adjustments, and we tell our people, even if there's some like creative thing that they've worked on for months and it's in the service, whether it's video or a song or I don't know, whatever it is, and it just doesn't go over well, we will shoot that thing in the head, because the goal is for us to not be happy. The goal is for us to get people, here's our weekend service goals, to get people to want to come back. That's the bottom line. If we get them to come back, then we can change their culture. So if the video didn't work, the song didn't work, the sermon didn't work, whatever it is, we'll assess it, and we do that right away, make adjustments on the fly.
That's good. How about you, Josh? How do you guys learn from your mistakes not to make them again?
Yeah, very, very much the same. We have very much the same flow. Like I said, I don't know that I've had an original idea in 3 years. I just studied all these guys, and I'm just working their plays. So we do 4 services. I meet after the first service, and we kind of evaluate exactly. Man, I love the term. I'm stealing that. We shoot it in the head. If it's not working, she ain't gonna make the cut, and we'll let it go. And because I just so firmly believe with that heartbeat, and we tell our church every weekend, we make decisions for people we haven't met yet, and that's how we filter. That's the lens we use for Sunday. And so if it's not working, so we do that there on our leadership. When our leadership team gets together on Tuesdays, we look back, we look forward, and then we look down the road every week. Because I'm not going to meet, obviously like with a kids person right there on Sunday morning after that service, but we'll talk to people specific to programming right there. But I want to hear from everybody on Tuesday. And then just in terms of like big picture stuff, one of the things that's been really great for us, we picked it up after we first got started, was the natural church development assessment. And I heard Pastor Chris Hodges talk about it several times, and so we just decided, man, we're going to do that. We're going to do it every year. And I've not been right yet with what I thought was going to be our low score. And if you don't know what that is, it's just Christian Schwartz did a study of a bunch of churches, found out there were 8 things, if they were in place, churches would grow. And so it's an evaluation and assessment of those 8 things done by randomly testing or surveying like 35 people in your church. And so we've done that. I've never been right. I always thought, it's our small groups, we got to get those better, or and I'm always wrong, which is why it's not growing. Like, that's the whole point of the thing, is it's going to show you your blind spot. And so the other great tool is anytime you can get a part of a coaching network, grow, relate, anything like that, where you can get a guy to come put eyeballs on what you're doing. Man, I would just, Pastor Lane Schranz from Church of the Highlands came to our church, and he tore me a new one. I mean, in love. He smiled the whole time he was doing it. But it changed the game for us. We don't do what we're doing now if he doesn't come just critically put eyeballs on what I was doing.
You know, one of the things you can do in that, Josh, and all of our team has that, and that is, who are 3 people that you're learning from that are doing your job better than you are?
Yes, sir.
And you should be learning from them. So a great assessment is to just empower every person to make sure they're learning from somebody. So that comes up in discussions all the time, executive meetings and pastors' meetings. Who are you learning from, and what are you working on right now? And that's a great way to do that, because you can't always have people come and assess, but you can be studying from them.
Speaking of who are you learning from, we're at the end of our hour, and I want to honor your guys' time. But let me just ask you, what are you up to? What are you doing to help churches, resources, books, conferences going on that you can let people know about real quick? Pastor Randy, how about you? What's going on?
First of all, the ARC conference in California is coming up in the first week in November. If you're not registered for that, you're dumb. So, you know, shoot your schedule in the head and get registered for it.
Shoot it in the head.
Because that conference is going to be great. So make sure you sign up for that, arcchurches.com. The thing that I'm really excited about as well is the Relate coaching that I'm doing. I'm actually going to be in Boston in 2 weeks doing a Relate one-day conference up there. You can get information for that at relatecoaching.com. We go and do one-day conferences at different places and kind of build relationships with people there, and then get them involved in our coaching network. I'm excited about that as well. So what am I learning right now? Personally, the thing I'm learning right now is I'm reading lots of books on parenting PKs, which obviously I have preacher's kids. Well, I think one of them's maybe not mine, but Amy won't tell me for sure. But so anyway, I'm reading books on that, and I've just found it really is hard, and I'm giving as much energy to my family as I ever have. In fact, probably even more so now. And there are seasons for that. My kids are all doing great. It's not like they're doing bad, but they're teenagers. One's graduating from high school this year, and when your kids get to be teenagers, it's weird. It's awkward for them in the church. It really is. And so I'm just doing a lot of studying and research on that. So that's the thing that I'm stretching and growing in the most right now personally.
That's awesome. Hi, Josh. How about you? What's going on? Something that people can learn from you?
If you're thinking about launching a church, I'll be doing the ARC 2.0 at Church of the Highlands in Birmingham in just a couple of weeks. I think it's like the 20th and 21st of October. And then, and then I agree with Pastor Randy. Shoot your schedule in the head if you're not planning on going to California. I'll be doing one of the breakouts on just assimilation and trying to help you work a growth track that'll get some folks connected. And so I'd love to get to hang out with you out there if you can go out there. And then it's funny, I'm just in a different season, but I'm reading a lot of parenting books right now. My family, we've just really been getting into growing kids God's way.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been great. And so I have a 4.5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and then we just found out we're going to grow the nursery one more time.
And, you need to buy a TV.
That's
Put it in the bedroom.
Now.
Put it on ESPN nonstop.
Yeah,
that's right.
Right now, and
so
to get rid of all the aspirin in the house and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah, it's that dang Total Gym I bought, man. Chuck Norris don't lie. It's just my wife can't resist.
Bro, you are hot, that's for sure.
And that is a great point to end on right there. If you want to join these two guys, they're going to be in California. I'm going to be in California as well. We're going to have fun at the ARC conference. We love the ARC. If you think this is fun, you get you a tribe of people in the ARC, and you'll have this kind of fun all the time, I promise. We love the people we get to do life with in the ARC. So, hey, on behalf of Pastor Greg, thank you so much. Let me tell you, go back in the archives. There's 20-something now that you can go back, ministry hangouts that you can watch, share with your staff. This is one you want to share with them as well. And then also next month in November, we're going to be looking at how is the church going to deal with the issue of homosexuality in the church. And in our culture, it's changing. There's lots of issues with it. And just add some wisdom. And Pastor Greg's going to be having some great conversations on that November 12th, I believe it is, that you'll join us the second Wednesday of every month. And so we'll see you next time on Ministry Hangouts with Pastor Greg Surratt.